Welcome to my channel. Welcome to the viewers to my channel. I'm Mahadi Selepe. I'm a Lesotho YouTuber living in Perth. How did you leave Rwanda?
So we got to the next city. So mind you, that's still in April. So the plane was shot at the beginning of April, or the 6th of April. And probably it took us about 2 weeks maybe to decide to leave. Things were getting worse and worse. And so towards the end of April, that's where my uncle comes from, which in Kinyarwanda is called Gikongoro. And then we stayed there for probably a month and a bit.
Okay.
But as we were staying there, the war was now progressing to the next city and next city, and then I think at some stage, Mom decided. I don't know what happened, because then we separated with my uncle. We were given another place in the military barrack, in one of their houses in that city, and that was the last time I saw my uncle with his kids until 2015 when we were here and I went to see them in Europe. And then we moved to the next city, which we also I think at the end of the journey we left Rwanda in July. That's where things now were really bad. Things had progressed to the next city and the next city, and we left in July, but we made 3 stops before leaving.
July
before
was,
going to
was
Congo.
the month when
The 100 days.
the rebels managed to capture almost the whole country.
Yeah,
because they were I've heard some testimonies from people who were in the rebel army movement, whatever, saying they were even complaining that their leader, who is the Rwandan leader today, didn't allow them to save the people who were dying, including the Tutsis, because that will deter the objective of conquering the country. So today, this man is revered throughout the world, and he makes even people silent. He's saying, "What have you done? I'm the one who stopped the genocide," and he didn't. That's a pure lie. Everyone knows. He was rushing to capture the country everywhere, killing as much people as he could find on the way. And then, after they conquered the place, then they could come back and see people who are coming out of the hidings, the Tutsis, Hutus, some of them. And then that's what he saved people. But he was looking for power. That was the objective. So Rwanda was conquered in July. On 19th, they installed the government. On my side, I had left Kigali a long time, in 93, not a long time, a year earlier, because I had a job in Gisenyi, in a bank, one of the agencies in a city neighboring with Congo, with Zaire. So I arrived hardly there because of insecurity as well. So I had to stay in the city so that I don't get killed. But still, those militias and extremist people from that area used to see me. They say, you look like the rebels. You are their tribe. What are you doing in our place? I say, no, please, I'm not. They say, no, we can see. Don't tell us anything.
Oh my goodness.
So I remember
but
one.
But the two tribes speak different languages.
No. We speak same language.
Okay.
But they know how to differentiate. This one is this.
Just the way you look.
They've got different features. In general.
It could be maybe saying how you can differentiate the Xhosas from Venda. Okay. Is it going to be difficult? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Or Somalians from Kenyans or Tanzanians.
Okay. That's easier.
So it's mostly that way, because they say the Tutsis are parent to people who came from Ethiopia and Somalia a long time.
Yeah, because they have
migrated.
distinct features.
People were just migrating. That's what the history said. Anthropologists were saying. But that's not a sin anyway.
No,
There's
it's
no
not.
need to
It's
fear
not.
or to hide the history. Yeah, and the Hutus, they were saying they came progressing towards Rwanda from Chad and other areas. I don't know, but they ended up leaving the country, speaking one language, though they are
From different backgrounds.
kind of different, because
Yeah.
some believe that they are Tutsis, they are not like them. Others they believe they are Hutus, they are not like them.
Okay.
So
okay.
it was distinct.
And you
Even
fall under
today,
that.
though people are not allowed to say it, it's only said during the commemoration of genocide. That's when the tribes are brought back to memory.
Okay.
Otherwise, the
Otherwise,
government
it's
says
one Rwanda.
everyone is the
Everyone
same
Rwandan. Okay.
because they want to hide
Which is a problem.
other history, other things they have done, because they want to dig. Many Hutus were killed, actually, more than Tutsis. That's what the people who did the research have found out. But they were killed by the current Rwandan regime. So, because now people will question that, they decided to say, no more Hutus, no more Tutsis, we are all Rwandans.
Yeah.
We only become Tutsis and Hutus during the genocide commemoration every year in April, when Hutus are being blamed to having killed the Tutsis, and the Tutsis are taken as victims, even though Tutsis, many of them know. Some of them were killed by their own who were fighting to get power. Yeah, so people are not allowed to tell their stories. You only tell the story that is in favor of government. That is the one allowed. Otherwise, yeah. So for me, I have lived like that.
So you there in the city, where you were working, people were thinking you're one of the
Yeah,
rebels.
of course. I've lived like that. Since I was born, they used to tell me, you look like them. Yeah, I grew up with the Tutsi kids. They were my friends. I visited them. Every Sabbath we come from church. We go to visit in afternoons. I will go to their homes because that's where I feel welcome, comfortable. They loved me. I loved them. They came to my home. Yeah, but that thing of anger, of revenge feelings happened to be in people's hearts, though they could not openly say it. But if you can see how the government that took over in 1960s, the Hutus coming to power for the first time, you can see that they isolated the Tutsis like a revenge, because they were not allowed to go into the army. They were not allowed to be members in the government, like ministers, big positions, political positions. So what they have, when we grew up, they were just being teachers, doing business, or working for NGOs. In the government, there were just a few numbers. Yeah, you can see someone like a director general somewhere, and but like people who have been ruling before, elite class, being put down like that, and believing that they are the best
the elite,
in their hearts, that really kept them in a very bad situation.
I think it makes me think of the South African, situation now that the blacks are in power, like the white people are not allowed in certain positions because
that is exactly the same thing.
It's like you guys can't.
Exactly. That's what happened in Rwanda as well. Yeah. Apartheid was almost 300 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Tutsi rule in Rwanda was almost the same years. So when they were kicked out, came slaves, like some of white ran after Mandela took power in 94.
Yeah.
We had so many empty houses. We found buildings in South Africa that were left. So many came to Australia, others went to UK. So when ANC took power, whites now are isolated a little bit everywhere. Exactly the same thing the Hutu government did in 1960s, until 90s. So today, Tutsis are in power. Hutus are also now isolated. They are not in the army. You can see them anywhere in the embassies all over the country, all over the world. You can see them ministerial portfolios. They took one or two, but only the one who will say what they say. He's not the one who will defend his tribe when they are being killed or whatever. So it's the same thing. That's how it is. But it's not allowed to be told. When you say it, they find a lot of crimes to accuse you so that you'll be silenced. Yeah, it's tough.
So you, Nelson, how did you leave Rwanda?
Yeah, as I was saying, in Gisenyi, where I lived from 93 in February, when I got this job in Bank of Kigali, I had to pay regularly every day these guys militias were there because when the government allowed the multi-party system to start, because that was one of the claims the rebels movement wanted, they were saying there's no democracy in the country. Then the president said, okay, now we allow parties to work, come and have your parties as well and compete. Now the parties were there, political parties, opposition, whatever, people were demonstrating and doing things. So these militias now, who were protecting the youth wing of every party, but in that area where he was, in Gisenyi, was the fifth of the president who was killed. Mostly the Hutus were almost like 90% living in the whole area, or 99 if I can say, because it could hardly see Tutsis. So they were telling me, oh, you are Tutsi, so you buy me a meter of beers. Every time we finish work, 4:35, that's when people normally walk and pass somewhere, have a beer or have a drink or get brochette, that is a delicacies, braai or whatever meat they do. When we pass with my colleagues who were from that area, the militias will come. I remember one militia boss, he was a champion boxer. He used to come and tell me, I want a meter of beers. So the meter of beers, they mean 12 bottles is a crate. The whole box, if you put them together and you measure, it was 1 meter on line. Yeah. So they used to tell me, we want a line of a meter of beers. So I had to buy so that they keep quiet. Otherwise, we don't want you in that area.
I see.
So there was a time.
Oh, so you had to basically bribe them.
Bribe them to survive. Yeah, that's it.
Oh my word.
And
they didn't believe that you're not. They didn't believe your story. No. But I mean, even if you were real, it's not your fault. You know what I mean?
During the killings, when President plane was shot down, that's when the trouble started. They killed whoever looked like a Tutsi, even if it's a Hutu, even their own people. If they don't know them. So everyone needed to be, oh, no, this is a child of so, and then leave. Then they put the knife over, or they stop shooting. Already maybe one killed or whatever. So people didn't want to go anywhere alone. And I think that is there's this lady who was also looking like Tutsi, and she was in a Hutu family where she was born. Her father was a doctor as well, a medical doctor. So she was taken out of the car by the rebels, militia. They wanted to kill her when she was with her dad and mom and siblings. Until all other people started screaming and said, no. That's the firstborn child of our doctor.
So she didn't look like the parents? Like
Not really, a little bit different. Yeah, her nose was a bit sharp, and that is one of the features they were looking for. They look at the hands, they look at, I don't know, these crazy people. So she got saved, and later on she heard about me as well. My story was known in the city. There's this other guy who is also a Tutsi.
But he's also
and he's saying he's not planning when they're gonna come to kill me, whatever. And she eventually found that I survived. So she used to come visit me. I go visit her to her house just to spend a day like that when we are off work. Yeah. Finally, when during the killings, there are a lot of situations I don't want to talk. Situations where it's too long.
You don't get yourself into
like when I got chased in the church. When the market, the home market, people in the market were running, chasing me.
This was when you were still in Rwanda.
Yeah, during the massacres, the genocide. I was still in that area, so I had to stay in hiding in the house for a long time until the whole country was now covered by the rebels. They were capturing city by city until that is the area they were progressing to. So people were evacuating now, going to Congo, passing near the main road where I was working, near that area. I waited until, I don't know what, look, I used to come out of the house to see what's happening around and go back. I didn't know, I had a boy who worked for me. Sometimes I tell him, go buy a kilo of potatoes. He will come back and say it's a $10. Yeah, the equivalent of $10, just 1 kilo. And that is the area where potatoes are so cheap. Normally, a bag would be a bag of 10 kilo would be $2, $1.
So prices did go up.
They did go up, but he was making it up because I couldn't go and verify. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! So he was making money out of you.
So that time I had the trouble because I could see that money would be finished quickly. I worked in a bank. We were well paid. I couldn't really have a problem to finish the month and. Yeah, but money every day I'm giving him.
So at this time, you had stopped working now when you were.
In some we stopped working for a while until they say now the situation is better and people can go back to work. But every time I went, I had to hide so that no one sees me on the way.
Yeah.
At the bank, when I arrived there, I found one cashier. Who was I think the how can you say supervisor of cashiers. She was not there. Then I said, what happened to her? They said they killed her. But
she was Tutsi.
That's what they said.
Oh, she looked
and I was the only person now left because the rest of the staff were from that area, so they knew each other. Luckily, they protected me. They didn't want me killed. Every time the militias came to look for me, they used to come and say, there, with the guns. But they can't come inside the bank with the guns because of security, so they will wait outside. Now, the time we are leaving, the manager will take me by back door and go. The time I'm leaving home to come to work, someone will come and park the car on the side at the door, and I sneak in and jump in and come back and go to work. It was very close because I had moved from the center of the city where I could be very easily seen. So I went to work to live near the.
How did you feel during this time, like living like that?
Every day you think you'll be killed.
And how does that make you feel?
Look, as a Christian, I was surprised that these things the church has, the AY or Pathfinders or whatever, these groups are really good. Some boys couldn't see me at the church for a while, so they decided to go, and their parents sent them to check. They came to my house, they knocked. Saturday afternoon, 2 boys, they said, we just want to check if you are here. Our parents were worried because they can't walk and check things in the city. They are scared, but the kids can walk.
So
kids from the area. So they wanted to know if you are still alive. And say, go tell them I'm fine, I'm alive. Yeah, but some
also kids were not targeted. They were not.
No, kids in that area where they live, it's fine.
Yeah,
because
in that area it was still okay.
Yeah, no.
But the kids were targeted.
The kids who will be targeted, the kids of the Tutsis or the kids of people who look like Tutsis, whatever. Yeah. So that was a challenge. And you never even know when you walk. You don't know whether you look like what. They are the ones who you just hear people screaming. It's you. They say what? Tutsi. Wow. Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah. So many people get killed.
But it wasn't just the fact that you were Tutsi. So you were in the southern was that the south, the north? Is that the north of the country?
You have no clue on geography.
Is that north?
It's a north.
So the north. So I'm from the south, and the south and the north already had issues. So in Rwanda, that's another issue that was. And because the president was from the north of the country,
The South were enemies of the
We were
North.
enemies, so we were always treated
Already
as second
enemies.
class.
But that was made by the government. Eh?
Yes, so we were always treated by second class. So we equally, whether you were Hutu or Tutsi, as a northerner, you were already
I see.
isolated. So you could get killed, although you may get a job or whatever, but during the war, especially if you were in that camp, that part,
even the job,
would
you don't
get
get
killed.
it in their areas.
Yeah.
I remember when I finished school, there was an offer in one of public works department. They pay very well, and I went there with other people who had sent their CVs. Then they were asking, "Where do you come from?"
Yeah, that was.
This was before the war.
Wow.
You just tell them your home village, then they know it's in the north, you get the job. You come from the south, sorry, job is finished.
Yeah.
Come back tomorrow.
Wow.
Even if you are well qualified. So those things, divisions
so
were...
That's already, yeah.
and I believe those are the divisions that encouraged the hatred and the killings as well.
So that made it
Yes,
worse.
it made it
Yeah.
worse.
My goodness.
So for someone, for a Tutsi that comes from the south where I come from, that's double sin.
It's
First,
yeah.
you are a Tutsi and then you are from the south. That's two sins.
Yeah.
They found me once. There's a guy, a man who found me on the street. I was walking. I always walked with people who protect me, and I walk in the middle. So we
What a life.
yeah, not too far, very close.
Okay.
I couldn't go more than a kilometer anyway, because you meet a roadblock. So I
if
make
you
sure
go
I don't
somewhere-
go. If you go somewhere there's a roadblock, you can be killed or arrested. Because
So the people that are protecting you, do you have to plan ahead to say, okay, at such and such a time, I'm going somewhere. Can you come and we walk together?
we plan ahead. They will
Okay.
come to see me and they say, let's go have a drink, whatever, or have food in a restaurant. Then I will tell them, no, I'll be killed. They say, no, we protect you. We are from here. Then I go with
That's
them.
very cool.
So one day, this man, he said, I saw him. He looked like a guy who was a referee of soccer. I knew him, so I wanted to say hello, greeting him, maybe letting him know I'm still alive. And he wasn't the one. It was another one.
Okay.
Then when he saw me, he says, "Do you know me?" I tell him, "No, I'm very sorry. I thought you were you were so.
Sorry,
Then
yeah.
he said, "Can I see your ID?" And this was the councillor of the one area in the city, an old man. And I showed him my ID. He looked at it. I'm from the south, southwest anyway, Kibuye. Then he looked and said, "Hey, two sins, like you say. You are from the south, and you are a Tutsi who changed the ethnicity, and it's written Hutu in your ethnicity, but don't look like." Then he said, "Where's my gun?" And he started looking for a gun. He didn't have a gun. Now he looked for other militias who were around him. If anyone can borrow him a gun, then he shoot. And those guys who were protecting me now came to him because they were watching. They tell him, "He is our brother. Just leave him alone." Then he said, "Oh, he's lucky I don't have a gun now. Next time, if I see him, he'll be gone." Yeah, so it happened so many times, a number of times. Yeah. So I lived that way, expecting to die each every day until when the rebels now were bombing everywhere, coming closer to the city. That was the last to capture in the northern part, and everyone fleeing to Congo, to DRC, through the border, where I was living near the main road anyway in the city, where they passed. And I heard there's no more noise. Because when you hear a song of thousands of people passing, you can hear the noise. And some had their goats, and others have kids crying, whatever happened. And I went out to check. When I opened the gate, I found there's no one. The whole city was desert. I only saw dogs running. Even the dogs were running. Every time the bomb fell, the dogs will be jumping the fence and run. So all of them were fleeing towards the safer place, Congo. Yeah. So I started thinking, where do I go now? I've been hiding for 3 months, over 100 days, I say. I can't go to my home district in the southern part. There's no transportation there, and people are coming, all of them from that area. So if they meet me again with the anger they have being chased by the Tutsi rebels, I will still have to pay the price. So I say, let me go to Congo. So I decided to cross the border without using the main frontier, you say customs, where they had everything was open anyway. It had been opened because people were fleeing. They were not checking, not verifying nothing for many days. Yeah. So I say, now this is the chaos, and these are the same people who are looking at me and they hate me. So let me use the shortcuts between houses, between small streets. And they went to Congo. When the rebels attacked the country, took over that also last portion of the country, which is in Gisenyi, the no inhabitants were left in the city. I was just alone. Because I came out of the house and I found everyone had left. Was gone. I started wondering, where do I go? Can I travel towards my home in Kibuye? But while everyone else is evacuating the country, I can't go anymore anyway. So the quickest way was to cross the border to Congo. So
because you're already there, you're near.
Yeah, I waited one afternoon because I wanted the killers, because I've used those Hutus in that area who were so angry that the rebels, Tutsi rebels, are chasing them from their properties. And they were also mixed with those who were killing the militias. So it was a chaos. I didn't want to work with them. I waited until everybody is at the border, because the song, when they're passing, you can hear like water. Really, it was huge. Thousands of people walking with their properties, with goats, with whatever they have. Cars could never cross anymore at the border. They had to leave them behind and just offload them and take whatever they can take. So because I knew that area well, I didn't go straight to the border post. I walked into the street between and went to the other side where we had hired the man who was hiding me, the owner of the place I was renting, was a businessman. So he had rent a house in Congo. Another side, so I knew that address. I was going there because I have no elsewhere to go. By the time I left,
did this man know you beforehand?
Come again? No, I came to his home when I was looking for accommodation. And he was a good man.
He was kind enough to.
Not all the people from that area were bad. Actually, I have met very good ones who protected me, and then others who were hunting me. God protected me anyway. I should quickly mention, before I left, I also got chased in Adventist church. There's a time the government announced people can go to church and pray, but very near, not too far, because security was not good. So the killings were still going on. So believing that I was alone, I know it's only God who protected me, and there's nothing I could really fear. I didn't know if I have anything, I've done anything wrong, and I say, okay, let me just go to church. I walked there, and once I was inside, I sat the back pews. Towards the end of the service, I kept looking at people looking behind. I didn't know what they were looking.
But you could see them.
One elder or deacon came closer to me and whispered when they were singing the last hymn. He said, be careful. Some people are watching you and they are not happy that you are here today. They have lost their president they love. They have lost some of their relatives who were at war, killed by the rebels. So you look like the rebels. So you are enemies to them. So you better find a way out quickly. There's nothing else we can do.
Goodness.
So when they close their eyes for the prayer, the last prayer, thank God people are taught to close their eyes. I sneaked out and quickly ran and left the place. Yeah, so when I went to Congo, I was alone. There was no family, I didn't know if they survived.
So I want to know how you crossed, because you said you didn't queue up, you walked. So there's a way to just...
Yes,
or there was
because the city of Gisenyi and Goma, it's like two cities that are together.
There's no border gate?
No, the border is at the main road. There are two border posts,
so
but in between, people can walk through houses.
No fencing or anything?
No.
That's interesting.
Yeah, those were places that were people were living there together a long time before colonial powers draw the line. So when they made this line, there was no natural barrier. So it was a flat place where people had houses, and there was no issue.
Yvette, how did you leave? How was your journey from leaving one country to the other? You also fled to Congo. How did you leave? Because Nelson walked?
No, I was very close.
So my mom drove.
Okay.
So yes, so the last leg of our journey within Rwanda was a city that is close to Congo, but on the other side, we were in the south of Congo. Nelson was on the other side.
Yeah, there is East Congo. It's a big province that is neighboring with Rwanda, and there is a lake Kivu between.
Yeah.
So I was in the northern part of that East Kivu. And she was from the south, so she fled the reason why they fled from the south, because that's where the lake ended. There's a dry land where you can walk. The north also with me the same thing. It's where the lake ends. It's around, I think, around 200 kilometers.
But is that usually a formal exit, like
yes, of course.
Customs.
But as Nelson said, it was
that
open.
time
it has been open.
Everyone was fleeing,
so
including those
officers
as well. Everyone was fleeing.
I need to look at the map of the thing. So you guys share two borders with Congo.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So I came from the south. Mom was driving, but we were many of us, and Mom was the only driver. So at this stage, we had met with my other auntie and my cousin that lived with my auntie. They had come from, so when we stopped where my uncles come from, they had, from the city, they went straight to where we come from.
Okay.
And then we met again in where we the last city at home in Rwanda before we crossed. Yeah, so I don't know how we met. I have no idea. I don't know how the parents and my auntie, because they're sisters. I'm not so sure how they spoke to each other. But the next thing I knew, they were both here. They had had their own journey. My cousin was already troubled because as they were traveling before we met, they were on foot and people were shooting behind them. And my cousin was younger than me, so she was my brother's age. So they probably about 4 years younger. They were about
12.
No, if I was 15, they were probably around 11 or so. And she was holding a friend as they were running through the shootings. The next thing, her friend fell down and she was shot. And she had to keep going. She was like, Yvette, I just had to keep going. My auntie just said, don't look. Because the rule is, don't look back. That's the rule when the shootings are happening. If you fall, goodbye. But don't look back.
Oh my goodness.
Because in looking back, a lot of people get shot.
Of course, yeah.
So you don't look back. So that was the rule she had been given when they left. Don't look back. Keep going. So she kept going. And so when we met, she was still dealing with what had just happened, the trauma. She was like, I left her. Like, I can't understand. And this is an 11-year-old.